That conversation was 2 weeks ago. Tomorrow, David and I are going to the children's hospital together. We're going to present them with a check for $500,000 to establish the Elena Castellano Endowment for Pediatric Cancer Research. $500,000 that started with a $25 monthly donation from a man trying to pay back a debt that couldn't be measured in money. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something that happened just last week that convinced me David's transformation might actually be real. I got a phone call from Henderson Marketing. Not from David's old boss, but from their head of human resources, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been investigating the financial irregularities that Carlos had first discovered. "Mr. Castellano, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from David Kellerman, who listed you as a character reference." A character reference? David had never mentioned using me as a reference for anything. "Ms. Chen, how can I help you?" "Well, this is somewhat unusual, but I'm calling because Mr. Kellerman has made a request that frankly surprised our entire management team." She explained that 3 months earlier, David had contacted Henderson Marketing directly, not to ask for his job back, not to complain about his treatment, but to make a voluntary confession. David had admitted to the embezzlement scheme, all of it. He'd provided documentation of every fake invoice, every fraudulent transaction, every dollar he'd stolen over 3 years. He'd even prepared a detailed analysis of which clients had been affected and how much each had been overbilled. "Mr. Castellano, in 23 years of human resources work, I've never had an employee voluntarily confess to crimes they'd committed, especially when we hadn't discovered the full extent of their activities." But David hadn't stopped there. He'd also proposed a restitution plan. Instead of going to prison, David wanted to work with Henderson Marketing to make their clients whole. He'd already started making payments to the clients who'd been defrauded, using money from his car dealership commissions and his monthly savings. He's paid back about $60,000 so far, and he's projected a timeline for full restitution within 8 years. He's also agreed to submit to regular financial audits to ensure he's complying with the payment plan. Ms. Chen paused. "Mr. Castellano, your son-in-law told us you were the one who convinced him to come forward. He said you taught him that taking responsibility for his actions was more important than avoiding consequences." I was speechless. David had never mentioned any of this to me. "Ms. Chen, what did your company YouTube storytelling script? During lunch, my son-in-law mocked my job. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. What they don't tell you is that sometimes it takes 37 years to get cold enough. My name is Eugene Castellano, and I'm 71 years old. 3 weeks ago, I destroyed a man's entire world with nothing more than a smile and 2 words. The man who thought he knew me. The man who married my daughter. The man who had no idea that the quiet custodian he'd been mocking for 15 years owned the very building where his corner office sat. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're going to understand why what happened had to happen, you need to know the whole story. And if this story teaches you anything about family, respect, or the dangerous assumptions we make about people, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you'll want to remember this channel when I tell you what I found hidden in that office safe. See, this story doesn't start with that lunch. It doesn't even start with David Kellerman walking into my daughter's life 15 years ago with his designer suits and his condescending smile. This story starts in 1987, when I was 34 years old and stupid enough to believe that hard work and good intentions were enough to guarantee success. I was married to the most beautiful woman in Philadelphia, Elena Ricci, daughter of Italian immigrants who ran a small grocery store in South Philly. Elena had eyes the color of espresso and a laugh that could make you forget your own name. More importantly, she had a mind for business that put most MBA graduates to shame. We'd been married 2 years, living in a tiny apartment above her parents' store, saving every penny we could scrape together. Elena was 6 months pregnant with Sophia, and I was working 3 jobs: construction during the day, security guard at night, and weekend maintenance at a small office building downtown. That building was called Meridian Tower, though back then it was just the old Hartwell building. 12 floors of outdated offices that the owner, George Hartwell, couldn't fill because the place was falling apart. Broken elevators, leaky pipes, heating system that worked when it felt like it. Most maintenance guys would have run screaming from that job, but I saw something different. I saw potential. Every Saturday and Sunday, I'd walk through those empty floors, taking notes on what needed fixing, what needed upgrading, what needed replacing entirely. I'd sketch out floor plans in my head, imagine how the space could flow better, how the lighting could be improved, how the whole building could be transformed into something people would actually want to work in. Elena used to tease me about my building obsession. She'd find me at the kitchen table at midnight surrounded by notebooks full of measurements and cost estimates and renovation plans. "Eugene," she'd say, rubbing her growing belly, "you're going to dream in blueprints if you don't stop." But she understood. Elena always understood. She knew I wasn't just fixing broken toilets and replacing burnt-out light bulbs. I was learning. Every pipe I repaired taught me about plumbing systems. Every electrical problem taught me about power distribution. Every tenant complaint taught me about what people actually needed from their workspace. More than that, I was building relationships. The security guards knew they could trust me to fix things properly the first time. The few tenants who remained in the building started calling me directly when they had problems instead of going through the management company. Even George Hartwell, who was 73 and tired of dealing with a money-losing property, began asking my opinion about major repairs. That's when the idea hit me. It was March of 1988, and Elena was 8 months pregnant, so big she couldn't see her feet anymore. I was replacing a water heater in the basement of Meridian Tower when George Hartwell came down to check on the work. "Eugene," he said, watching me wrestle with the old unit, "I've been thinking." I paused, wrench in hand, sweat dripping down my face. This building is killing me financially. I'm 73 years old. My wife wants to move to Florida, and I'm tired of losing money every month on a property that's more trouble than it's worth. I nodded, not sure where this was going. "You know this building better than anyone. You know what it needs. You know what it could become. Hell, you probably know it better than I do at this point." George sat down heavily on an overturned crate. "I'm going to put it up for sale. And before I call any real estate agents or put it on the market, I wanted to ask you something. You interested in buying it?" I almost dropped the wrench. "Mr. Hartwell, I don't have that kind of money." "How much money do you have?" I thought about our savings account. Every dollar Elena and I had managed to put away over 2 years of marriage. Every overtime hour, every weekend job, every penny we'd scraped together for our future. $43,000. George was quiet for a long time. "The building's worth about $800,000 in its current condition. Maybe $1.5 million if someone fixed it up properly. I've had appraisals done." My heart sank. $43,000 might as well have been 43 cents. "But here's the thing," George continued. "I'm not going to live forever, and I'm tired of being a landlord. So here's what I'm thinking. You give me your $43,000 as a down payment. I carry the mortgage at 6% interest. You take over all the maintenance, all the tenant relations, all the day-to-day operations. You fix the building up properly, fill those empty units, and start making some real money." I stared at him. "You'd do that? You'd finance the whole building? Eugene, you've been taking care of this place like it was your own for 2 years. You know every pipe, every wire, every crack in every wall. If anyone can turn this money pit into a profitable property, it's you." I called Elena from the payphone in the lobby. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the number. "Elena, you need to sit down." "Eugene, I'm 8 months pregnant. I'm always sitting down. What's wrong?" I told her about George's offer, about the $43,000, about the chance to own a building instead of just fixing one. There was silence on the other end of the line. "Elena, you still there?" "I'm here, I'm just thinking." More silence. "Elena, talk to me." "Eugene, that's all our money. Every penny we have saved for the baby, for emergencies, for our future. If this doesn't work? If this doesn't work, we're broke and homeless with a newborn baby. And if it does work? If it does work, we own a building in downtown Philadelphia." Elena was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Elena, do it." What? Do it. Buy the building. Take the risk. If we're going to fail, let's fail trying to build something instead of fail playing it safe. That night, we sat at our tiny kitchen table with a calculator, a legal pad, and every piece of financial documentation we owned. We ran the numbers 12 different ways. We calculated mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance costs, maintenance expenses, potential rental income if we could fill the empty units. No matter how we ran the numbers, we were looking at least 3 years of breaking even at best, losing money at worst. 3 years of living paycheck to paycheck while I poured every free moment into renovating a building that might never become profitable. Eugene, Elena said finally, what does your gut tell you? I thought about walking through those empty floors every weekend. I thought about the potential I saw in those spaces. I thought about the relationships I'd built with the existing tenants, the trust I'd earned from George Hartwell, the knowledge I'd gained about every system in that building. My gut tells me this is our shot, our one chance to build something that could change everything for our family. Elena smiled and put her hand on her belly. Then we better not waste it. We signed the papers on April 15, 1988. Tax day, which Elena said was either a good omen or a terrible one, depending on how you looked at it. Sophia was born 3 weeks later, on May 6th, in the same hospital where we'd establish her mother's memorial fund 35 years in the future. That first year was brutal. I kept my security job for steady income while spending every daylight hour renovating the building. Elena, even with a newborn baby, managed the books, handled tenant calls, and somehow kept us organized and sane. The second floor had been vacant for 8 months when we bought the building. The carpet was stained, the walls were dingy, and the whole space smelled like cigarettes and despair. But it had good bones, high ceilings, big windows, solid hardwood floors underneath that awful carpet. I spent 6 months on that floor alone, ripped out the carpet and refinished the hardwood, painted every wall, fixed every electrical outlet, replaced every light fixture. Elena would bring Sophia down in her stroller, and the three of us would work together, me fixing things, Elena cleaning and organizing, baby Sophia providing entertainment from her portable playpen. When we finally rented that space to a small law firm, the monthly rent was enough to cover our mortgage payment and still leave us a little left over. It was the first month since buying the building that we didn't have to choose between groceries and heating bills. Elena cried when that first rent check came in. Not from relief, though there was plenty of that. She cried because she could see it happening. The dream becoming reality. The risk paying off. We're really doing this, she said, holding the check up to the light like she couldn't believe it was real. We're really doing this, I agreed. Over the next 5 years, we renovated and filled every empty unit in that building. Each new tenant meant a little more monthly income. Each satisfied tenant meant referrals to potential new tenants. Each successful rental meant we could afford to make the next space even better. By 1993, Meridian Tower was completely full, and we had a waiting list of businesses that wanted to move in. George Hartwell, who'd moved to Florida but stayed in touch, called to congratulate us. Eugene, I drive by the old building whenever I'm in town to visit my grandkids. The place looks incredible. You did exactly what I knew you could do. We got lucky, George. Luck nothing. You worked harder than anyone I've ever seen. And that wife of yours, Elena's got a head for business that's going to make you rich if you listen to her. George was right about Elena's business sense. While I focused on the maintenance and tenant relations, she handled the financial side with a precision that would have impressed a Wall Street accountant. She tracked every expense, negotiated every contract, and somehow managed to squeeze profitability out of what had seemed like an impossible situation. More importantly, she had vision. Eugene, she said one evening in 1994 when Sophia was 6 and we'd finally paid down enough of the mortgage to have some breathing room, we need to buy another building. I looked up from the newspaper. Another building? Elena, we're just now getting comfortable with this one. Exactly, we're comfortable. We know what we're doing now, and there are 3 buildings for sale within 6 blocks of Meridian Tower, that are in exactly the same condition we bought this one in. She pulled out a folder. Elena always had folders, full of listings, financial projections, and renovation estimates. Look at this one. The Riverside Commons building. 15 floors, built in 1965, about 60% occupied. The owner is asking $700,000, but I think we could get it for $650 if we move fast. I studied the numbers she'd prepared. Elena, we don't have $650,000. No, but we have equity in this building now. We can get a loan using Meridian Tower as collateral. Over the next 2 hours, Elena laid out a plan that was simultaneously brilliant and terrifying. Use our successful first building to finance a second building. Renovate and fill the second building while managing the first. Once the second building was profitable, use both buildings as collateral for a third. It's called leveraging, she explained. Rich people do it all the time. Elena, we're not rich people. Not yet, but we could be. The conversation continued late into the night. Elena with her spreadsheets and projections, me with my questions and concerns. What if we couldn't fill the units? What if the renovation costs were higher than expected? What if the economy tanked and we lost everything? Eugene, Elena said finally, what's the worst thing that could happen? We could lose both buildings and end up bankrupt. And what's the best thing that could happen? We could end up owning multiple buildings and actually being wealthy. And if we don't take the risk? If we just stay comfortable with what we have? I thought about that. If we don't take the risk, we'll always wonder what could have been. Elena smiled. Besides, we're not the same people who bought this building 6 years ago. We know how to do this now. We've proven we can take something broken and make it profitable. She was right, of course. Elena was always right about the big things. We bought the Riverside Commons building in September of 1994. This time the renovation process went faster because we had experience, better contractors, and a clear vision of what we were trying to achieve. We had that building fully rented within 18 months. The third building came in 1997, the fourth in 2000. By the time Sophia graduated high school in 2006, we owned 7 buildings and had a net worth that made us millionaires on paper, even though we still lived in the same modest house and drove the same reliable cars we'd had for years. Dad, Sophia asked me once during her senior year, why don't we live in a mansion like Tommy Martinelli's family? Tommy Martinelli's father owned a chain of auto repair shops and lived in a house that looked like something from a movie. Swimming pool, 3-car garage, rooms they didn't even use. Because mansions don't make you wealthy, Sophia. Investments make you wealthy. Mansions just make you look wealthy. What's the difference? The difference is that looking wealthy means spending money to impress people. Being wealthy means having enough money that you don't need to impress anyone. It was a lesson Elena and I had learned early and never forgot. Every dollar we didn't spend on luxury was a dollar we could invest in the next building, the next opportunity, the next step toward real financial security. But the most important lesson we taught Sophia wasn't about money at all. Every Saturday morning, from the time she was old enough to walk, Sophia would come with me on my rounds to check on the buildings. She'd watch me test the heating systems, inspect the plumbing, talk with tenants about their needs and concerns. Why do you still do this stuff, Dad? Can't you pay someone else to check on things? I could, but then I wouldn't know what was really happening in my buildings. What do you mean? Sophia, these buildings are full of people who work here, people who depend on having a clean, safe, comfortable place to do their jobs. If I don't know what they need, how can I make sure they get it? More than that, I explained. Staying involved in the day-to-day operations meant I understood my business from the ground up. I knew which elevators ran smoothly and which ones needed attention. I knew which tenants paid their rent early and which ones needed gentle reminders. I knew which heating systems were efficient and which ones were energy hogs. That knowledge is power, Sophia. And power without understanding is dangerous. Elena died on a Tuesday, October 23rd, 2017. She'd been fighting cancer for 2 years, and we all knew the end was coming. But that doesn't make it easier when it actually arrives. The funeral was packed with people whose lives Elena had touched. Not just family and friends, but tenants from our buildings, contractors we'd worked with over the years, business owners from the neighborhood where we'd grown up. David was there, of course. He and Sophia had been married for 12 years by then, and he played the role of grieving son-in-law perfectly. Helped carry the casket, gave a speech about how much Elena had meant to the family, even shed what appeared to be genuine tears. But I noticed things. I noticed that during the reception after the funeral, when people were sharing memories of Elena, David spent most of his time talking on his phone in the parking lot. Business calls, he said later. Couldn't be avoided. I noticed that when Elena's sister Maria tried to tell David a story about Elena's kindness to their elderly neighbor, David listened with the polite but distant expression of someone waiting for the conversation to end. I noticed that when I mentioned setting up a memorial fund in Elena's name, David's immediate response was to ask about the tax implications. At the time, I chalked it up to grief affecting people differently. Some people shut down emotionally when they lose someone important. Some people throw themselves into work to avoid dealing with the pain. But looking back now, I think those moments at Elena's funeral were when I first started to see the real David Kellerman. Not the charming man who'd swept my daughter off her feet, not the successful businessman who always seemed to have everything under control, but the person underneath all that performance. Someone who saw other people's emotions as inconveniences. Someone who calculated the benefits of every situation, even a funeral. Someone who had learned to mimic human compassion without actually feeling it. After Elena's death, something changed in how David treated me. Before, he'd been politely dismissive, the way you might treat a distant relative you had to tolerate at family gatherings. After, he became actively condescending. Maybe it was because Elena had always been a buffer between us. She'd smooth over awkward moments, redirect conversations when they got tense, make sure David understood that disrespecting me meant disrespecting her. With Elena gone, that protection disappeared. The first time I really noticed the change was at Christmas dinner, 2017. Elena had been gone for 2 months, and Sophia had insisted on hosting Christmas at her house to keep the family traditions alive. David spent most of the dinner talking about his latest promotion at Henderson Marketing, his new corner office, the important clients he was managing. When Sophia asked about my year, I mentioned that I'd been considering selling one of the smaller buildings to focus on the more profitable properties. David laughed. Eugene, you're 72 years old. Don't you think it's time to retire from the maintenance business altogether? I mean, at your age, you should be enjoying your golden years, not crawling around in basements fixing pipes. The comment stung, but what stung more was that Sophia didn't say anything. She just smiled uncomfortably and changed the subject. After dinner, I was helping clear the dishes when David cornered me in the kitchen. Eugene, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. I kept loading plates into the dishwasher. Sophia and I have been discussing your living situation. My living situation? You're all alone in that house now. Big house, lots of maintenance, probably getting expensive to heat and cool. We think it might be time to consider alternatives. I turned to face him. What kind of alternatives? Well, there are some very nice assisted living communities. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. Safe. You'd have people to socialize with, meals provided, medical care if you need it. You could sell the house, use the proceeds to pay for your care. I stared at this man who thought he knew what was best for me. David, I'm 72, not 92. I'm in perfect health. I manage a multi-million-dollar property portfolio, and I've been taking care of myself just fine for the past 2 months. I know. But Sophia worries about you, we both do. What if you fall down those stairs? What if you have a medical emergency and no one's there to help? What David didn't say, but what I heard clearly was, what if you become our responsibility? That conversation planted a seed of resentment that grew over the following months. Every family gathering, every phone call, every interaction with David carried an undertone of condescension that was becoming harder to ignore. But the worst part wasn't how David treated me. The worst part was watching how it affected Sophia. My daughter had always been confident, outspoken, unafraid to stand up for what she believed in. But around David, she became smaller, quieter, more anxious to please. When David made dismissive comments about my work, Sophia would laugh nervously and change the subject instead of defending me. When David criticized my lifestyle choices, still driving the same truck I'd owned for 15 years, still living in the same house where Sophia grew up, she'd nod along as if she agreed with him. It broke my heart to watch my strong, intelligent daughter diminish herself to keep peace in her marriage. But I understood why she did it. Elena and I had raised Sophia to be loyal to family, to work through problems instead of running from them, to believe that marriage was a commitment you honored even when it was difficult. Those were good values, but like all good things, they could be twisted into something harmful when applied to the wrong situation. By 2024, 15 years into their marriage, I could see that Sophia was exhausted from the constant effort of managing David's ego while protecting my feelings. She was caught between loyalty to her husband and love for her father, and that impossible position was wearing her down. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't really about David disrespecting me. This was about David slowly eroding the confidence and independence of the woman I loved more than life itself. And that's when I decided it was time to do something about it. It started on a Tuesday, February 14th, Valentine's Day, though there wasn't much love in the air at Rossi's Italian kitchen that afternoon. My daughter Sophia had called me 2 days earlier, her voice carrying that forced brightness she used when she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. "Your father-in-law wants to take you to lunch," she'd said. "David thinks it would be nice if you two spent some time together." I should have known something was wrong right then. In 15 years of marriage to my daughter, David Kellerman had never once suggested we spend time together. Hell, the man barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings, usually finding some excuse to step away when I entered a room. But Sophia sounded so hopeful. So I said yes. The restaurant was one of those places where the bread costs more than I used to make in a day. White tablecloths, waiters who introduced themselves like they were auditioning for Broadway, and wine lists thick as phone books. Not my kind of place. But David had insisted. He was always insisting on things that made him feel important. I arrived 5 minutes early, wearing the only dress shirt I owned that didn't have paint stains on the cuffs. The hostess looked at me like I'd tracked mud through her living room, but she led me to the table anyway. David was already there, checking his phone, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He looked up when I sat down, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not the usual indifference or barely concealed disdain. This was different. This was anticipation, like he'd been looking forward to this lunch for reasons I couldn't understand. We ordered. He got the lobster ravioli. I got spaghetti and meatballs because it was the cheapest thing on the menu that looked filling. David ordered wine without asking if I wanted any. A bottle that cost $87. I knew because I watched him calculate the tip on his phone later, and he made sure I could see the receipt. For the first 20 minutes, we made small talk. How was work? How was Sophia? Did I see the game last weekend? Normal stuff. But I could feel him building up to something. The way a storm builds on the horizon, all that pressure gathering in the air until you can taste the electricity. Then it happened. We were halfway through our meals when David set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. He had this smile on his face. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile a cat gives a mouse right before the final pounce. "Eugene," he said, using my first name like we were old friends. "I've been thinking about our conversation at Christmas." I didn't remember having any meaningful conversation with him at Christmas, or any Christmas, but I nodded and waited. "You mentioned you were thinking about retirement," he continued, "and I just want you to know, Sophia and I have been talking, and we think it's a great idea." I hadn't mentioned retirement, not once. I loved my job, even if it wasn't glamorous. 37 years I'd been maintaining buildings, keeping things clean and running smooth. It was honest work. Work that mattered. "I'm not ready to retire, David. I like what I do. That smile got wider. Come on, Eugene. Let's be honest here. You're what, 70? And you're still… He paused, like he was choosing his words carefully. You're still pushing a mop around office buildings. Don't you think it's time to, step aside? Let younger people handle the real work? The real work. Those words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my face steady. I'd had a lot of practice over the years, keeping my reactions to myself. It's good work, David. Steady. Reliable. He laughed. Actually laughed out loud, loud enough that the couple at the next table turned to look. Steady? Eugene, you clean toilets for a living. You empty trash cans. You're… He leaned forward, and his voice dropped to what he probably thought was a compassionate whisper. You're nobody. You've always been nobody. And that's fine. That's fine. Not everyone can be successful. But don't you think Sophia deserves a father she can be proud of? The restaurant went quiet around me. Or maybe that was just the blood rushing in my ears. I set down my fork very carefully, the way you handle something fragile that might shatter if you're not gentle enough. David wasn't done. I mean, when people ask what my father-in-law does for a living, what am I supposed to say? That you push a cart around an office building? That you've been doing the same menial job for decades with no ambition, no drive to better yourself? It's embarrassing, Eugene. For all of us. He took a sip of his wine, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just lit a fuse that had been 37 years in the making. So here's what I'm thinking. Sophia and I found this nice assisted living place about an hour outside the city. Nothing fancy but clean, affordable. You could retire, collect your Social Security, and finally stop pretending that what you do matters. We'd visit on holidays. It would be better for everyone. I looked at this man who'd married my daughter, this man who'd sat at my kitchen table and eaten meals I'd cooked, this man who had no idea who he was talking to. And I smiled. It wasn't a big smile, just a small upturn at the corners of my mouth. But something about it made David's confident expression flicker for just a moment. That's an interesting proposal, David. Right? I knew you'd see reason. Sophia was worried you'd be stubborn about it. But I told her you were smarter than that. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. Old phone, nothing fancy. Cracked screen, case held together with electrical tape. David glanced at it and smirked. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Then I hit call and put the phone to my ear. David watched me, confusion starting to creep across his face. The call connected on the second ring. Jennifer, it's Eugene. I need you to prepare the Kellerman file for immediate review. Yes, the eviction proceedings. I want every document, every payment record, every communication from the past 2 years on my desk first thing tomorrow morning. David's fork clattered against his plate. What? No. Don't wait for the standard 30-day notice period. I want them out by the end of the week. Personal reasons. Yes, I understand it's unusual, but I'm invoking the emergency clause in Section 12 of the lease agreement. I could see David's face going pale, but I wasn't done. And Jennifer, run a full credit and background check on David Kellerman. Social Security number. I rattled off 9 digits from memory. I want to know every debt, every financial irregularity, every parking ticket from the past 10 years. If there's dirt, I want to know about it by tomorrow afternoon. I hung up and put the phone back in my pocket. David was staring at me like I'd just spoken in ancient Greek. Eugene, what the hell was that about? I picked up my napkin and wiped my mouth, took a slow sip of water, let the silence stretch out until it was uncomfortable. David, I said finally, let me tell you a story. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no words came out. 37 years ago, I was a different man. Young, ambitious, maybe a little too trusting for my own good. I'd just gotten married to the love of my life, Elena, and we were expecting our first child. I had dreams then. Big dreams. I wanted to build something, create something that would last. David was still staring, but I could see the wheels starting to turn in his head. So I took every penny I had, every penny Elena and I had saved for our future, and I bought a building. Nothing fancy, just a small office complex downtown. 12 floors, built in 1962, needed a lot of work. But I saw potential where other people saw problems. I signaled the waiter for more water. No rush. I had all day. The thing about owning a building, David, is that you learn every inch of it. Every pipe, every wire, every creaking floorboard. And the best way to learn a building is to take care of it yourself. So that's what I did. I became the maintenance man for my own property. David's face was the color of old parchment now. It made sense financially. Why pay someone else to do work I could do myself? And it gave me an excuse to be there every day, to keep an eye on my investment. Plus, I liked the work. There's something honest about fixing what's broken, cleaning what's dirty. It's immediate, tangible. You can see the results of your effort. I paused to let that sink in. Over the years, the building appreciated. I bought another one, then another. Always played it quiet, always lived below my means. Elena and I, we never saw the point in flashy displays of wealth. We drove old cars, lived in a modest house, shopped at thrift stores. Our money went into investments, into security for our daughter's future. David's breathing had gotten shallow. I could see the sweat starting to bead on his forehead despite the restaurant's air conditioning. When Elena died 8 years ago, she left me half of everything. The other half went into a trust for Sophia. Our daughter is a wealthy woman, David. She just doesn't know it yet. We wanted her to marry for love, not money. Looks like our plan worked, considering she chose you. The waiter approached to ask if we wanted dessert, took one look at David's face and quickly retreated. So when you ask me what I do for a living, David, the answer is simple. I'm a landlord. I own 17 buildings in this city, including the Meridian Tower where you work. The 42nd floor corner office with the view of the harbor. That's mine. You pay me rent every month. Well, your company does. David tried to speak but only managed a strangled whisper. The assisted living facility you mentioned sounds lovely. But I think I'll stay right where I am. In fact, I think I'll stay right where I am for a very long time. The question is, where are you going to be? I stood up and pulled out my wallet, left enough cash on the table to cover both meals and a generous tip. The waiter had been attentive, even if the company was lacking. David finally found his voice. Eugene. Wait. I never. Look, I was just trying to. I put my hand on his shoulder, felt him flinch under my touch. David, in 37 years of business, I've learned that the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate people, especially people who have access to your credit report, your lease agreements, and your employment records. I leaned down so only he could hear. The building you work in? The lease is up for renewal next month. Rent's going up. Way up. Might want to update your resume. I walked away from that table, and I walked away from 15 years of swallowing insults and condescension. But the story doesn't end there. It barely even begins there. Because what I didn't tell David at that lunch was that I already knew about the money. See, when you own buildings, you develop relationships with all kinds of people. Security guards, IT technicians, cleaning crews, people who work invisible jobs, who move through offices like ghosts, seeing everything and being seen by no one. 3 months before that lunch, a man named Carlos Martinez had come to see me. Carlos cleaned offices in the Meridian Tower, had been doing it for 12 years. Good worker, reliable, the kind of man you could trust with keys to everything. Carlos had a problem. He'd been cleaning David's office late one night when he'd noticed something odd. David had left his computer on, and there were spreadsheets open. Normally, Carlos wouldn't have looked twice, but some of the numbers caught his eye. Big numbers. Numbers that didn't make sense for someone who worked at a mid-level marketing firm. Carlos knew right from wrong. He also knew that sometimes the right thing to do isn't the legal thing to do. So he took photos. The photos showed financial records, Transactions, payments coming into accounts that shouldn't have existed, money being moved around in patterns that looked less like business and more like something else. When Carlos brought me those photos, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. That old investigative instinct, the one that had served me well in business, started to wake up. But before I tell you what those photos revealed, I need to explain something about Carlos Martinez that made his discovery even more significant. Carlos wasn't just any cleaning person. He'd worked his way through community college while cleaning offices at night, earned a degree in accounting, and spent 3 years trying to get hired at a legitimate accounting firm. But Carlos had 2 strikes against him in the corporate world. His accent was thick, and his resume had a 10-year gap where he'd been raising his disabled daughter as a single father. So Carlos cleaned offices. But Carlos also understood numbers better than most CPAs I'd ever met. When he showed me those photographs, spread out on my kitchen table like evidence in a criminal investigation, Carlos didn't just point out the irregularities. He explained them. "Mr. Castellano, look at this invoice. Henderson Marketing is billing their client, Brookstone Development, for consulting services from a company called Meridian Business Solutions." I looked at the document. It showed a payment of $15,000 for unspecified consulting work. "Here's the problem," Carlos continued. "I've been cleaning Henderson Marketing's offices for 12 years. I know everyone who works there, and I know what services they provide. They don't do the kind of consulting that would be worth $15,000 to a development company." He pulled out another photograph. So I started paying attention. This Meridian Business Solutions company shows up on invoices about twice a month, always for amounts between $10,000 and $20,000, always for consulting services that are never specified. Carlos had done his homework. Over the course of 3 months, he documented 17 separate transactions between Henderson Marketing's clients and this mysterious Meridian Business Solutions company. "Mr. Castellano, I looked up Meridian Business Solutions online. The company exists, but it's just a shell. No office, no employees, no website, just a registered business name and a bank account." I stared at the photographs, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. "And you think David is behind this?" "I know David is behind this. Look at this." Carlos showed me a bank statement he'd photographed from David's desk. It showed regular deposits from Meridian Business Solutions into a personal account belonging to David and Sophia Kellerman. He's created a fake consulting company, billing it to his employer's clients, and depositing the payments into his personal account. Classic embezzlement, but dressed up to look legitimate. The total amount, according to Carlos's calculations, was just over $400,000 spread across 3 years. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Carlos discovered when he started digging deeper into David's financial records. "Mr. Castellano, your son-in-law isn't just stealing from his company. He's living way beyond his means and using the stolen money to maintain a lifestyle he can't afford." Carlos had compiled a detailed picture of David and Sophia's finances. The mortgage on their house was $4,200 a month. David's car payment was $890. Sophia's car payment was $640. Credit card payments totaled nearly $1,500 monthly. Their total expenses, not including food and utilities, were over $7,000 a month. David's legitimate salary at Henderson Marketing was $78,000 a year. After taxes, that left them about $4,800 a month in take-home pay. They were spending $2,200 more each month than David earned legally. "The stolen money isn't profit for him," Carlos explained. "It's survival. Without those fake consulting payments, he can't make his mortgage payment. He can't make his car payments. His whole lifestyle collapses." This revelation hit me like a physical blow. My daughter was living in a house and driving a car that were purchased with stolen money, and she had no idea. Every family dinner at their house, every time David bragged about his success, every condescending comment about my modest lifestyle, all of it built on a foundation of theft and lies. But Carlos wasn't finished. "There's something else, Mr. Castellano. Something that makes this even worse." He pulled out one final photograph. A letter from Henderson Marketing's insurance company discussing a claim for missing client funds. 2 months ago, one of Henderson Marketing's clients, Eastport Industries, discovered that they'd been overbilled by about $50,000 over the past year. They demanded an audit. I read the letter carefully. Eastport Industries had hired their own accountant to review Henderson Marketing's billing practices. That accountant had found evidence of inflated charges, fake consulting fees, and services that had never been provided. Henderson Marketing settled the claim quietly to avoid a lawsuit, but they're conducting their own internal investigation now. It's only a matter of time before they discover the full extent of what David has been doing. Carlos gathered up the photographs. Mr. Castellano, I estimate David has maybe 6 months before this whole thing explodes. When it does, he's looking at federal charges for mail fraud, wire fraud, and embezzlement. He could go to prison for 20 years. That night, after Carlos left, I sat in my kitchen until dawn, thinking about what I'd learned and what it meant for my family. David wasn't just arrogant and disrespectful. He was a criminal who'd been putting my daughter at risk for 3 years. If David got arrested, Sophia would lose her house. She'd lose her car. She'd lose her savings, because everything they owned was tied up in assets purchased with stolen money. More than that, she'd lose her reputation. Even if Sophia had no knowledge of David's crimes, being married to a convicted embezzler would follow her for the rest of her life. But there was something else that bothered me even more than the financial implications. David had been stealing money while simultaneously lecturing me about ambition, success, and making something of myself. He'd been committing felonies while suggesting I move to an assisted living facility because I wasn't contributing enough to society. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. But the calculated cruelty was worse, because I realized that David's treatment of me wasn't just about arrogance or class differences. It was about projection. David felt guilty about the lies he was living, so he convinced himself that everyone around him was somehow inferior or dishonest. If he could make me feel small and insignificant, it distracted from the fact that his own life was built on fraud. He didn't just disrespect me because he thought I was beneath him. He disrespected me because he needed to believe I was beneath him, to justify what he was doing to support his lifestyle. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let David destroy my daughter's life when his crimes caught up with him. I wasn't going to let Sophia pay the price for her husband's greed and stupidity. But I also wasn't going to let David continue treating me like garbage while he stole money to fund his sense of superiority. I was going to take control of the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. The plan I developed over the next few weeks was more complex than what I told David at that restaurant lunch. The eviction threat was real, but it was just the opening move in a longer game. Step 1 was getting David away from Henderson Marketing before the internal investigation discovered his crimes. If he quit voluntarily, there was a chance the investigation would lose momentum, especially if the missing money stopped disappearing. Step 2 was forcing David to find legitimate work that would teach him the value of honest effort. The car dealership job wasn't punishment, it was education. Step 3 was the payment plan for the children's hospital. This wasn't just about restitution, it was about giving David a way to transform his guilt into something positive, his crime into an ongoing act of charity. But there was a step 4 that I never told David about. Step 4 was making sure that if David ever reverted to his old patterns, if he ever started treating people badly again, or found new ways to cheat and steal, I would have all the evidence I needed to put him in prison where he belonged. The private investigator I hired didn't just document David's past crimes. He set up ongoing monitoring of David's financial activities, his business dealings, his personal conduct. For the past 6 months, I've received monthly reports on David's behavior. His work performance at the car dealership, his treatment of colleagues and customers, his financial stability and spending habits. So far, the reports have been positive. David shows up on time, works hard, treats people with respect. He's living within his means for the first time in years. He's building legitimate relationships based on competence and reliability instead of manipulation and deception. But I'm not naive. People can change, but they can also relapse. David spent 3 years believing he was smarter than everyone around him, that he deserved more than he was willing to earn honestly. That kind of entitlement doesn't disappear overnight. Which brings me back to that lunch at Rossi's Italian kitchen and the moment when David asked me if I was still nobody. In that moment, David gave me exactly what I needed. Proof that his disrespect for me wasn't situational or temporary. It was fundamental to how he saw himself in relation to other people. Even facing financial pressure, even struggling to maintain his lifestyle, David's instinct was to make himself feel better by making someone else feel worse. That told me everything I needed to know about his character and his capacity for genuine change. I made some phone calls, called in some favors, had a private investigator look into David's finances. What we found made that lunch conversation seem like a friendly chat between old friends. David Kellerman wasn't just arrogant and dismissive. David Kellerman was stealing. For 3 years, he'd been skimming money from client accounts at Henderson Marketing Solutions. Small amounts at first, but getting bolder over time. He'd set up shell companies, fake vendor accounts, phantom consulting fees. Classic embezzlement dressed up in enough legitimate-looking paperwork to fool a casual audit. The total? Just over $400,000. But here's the thing about thieves. They get comfortable. They start to believe their own stories. David had gotten so comfortable that he'd stopped being careful. He'd been using company credit cards for personal expenses, claiming business trips that were really vacations, billing clients for work that was never done. I had enough evidence to put him in prison for the next decade, but I didn't want him in prison. Prison was too easy. Prison was quick. I wanted something more. Educational. So I waited. I watched. I planned. And I let him talk himself into a hole he couldn't climb out of. The day after our lunch, David called me. 6 times. I didn't answer. Then he called Sophia. She called me, confused and worried. Daddy, David says there was some kind of misunderstanding at lunch. He says you made some phone call that scared him. What's going on? I told her we'd had a nice meal and a good conversation. I told her I was looking forward to getting to know her husband better. I told her David seemed very interested in my work and that I was happy to finally have his respect and attention. None of those things were lies exactly. David called again that evening. This time I answered. Eugene, we need to talk. I thought we had a very productive conversation earlier, David. You don't understand. I can't lose my job. Sophia and I, we have expenses. You have a mortgage on a house that's worth less than you owe on it. You have credit card debt from trying to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford. You have car payments on vehicles that depreciate faster than you can make the monthly installments. Silence on the other end of the line. David, I continued, you've spent 15 years treating me like I was invisible, like I was less than nothing. You want to know what I learned in all those years of being invisible? I learned to see everything. More silence. The thing is, David, I don't actually want to destroy you. Believe it or not, I love my daughter and destroying you would hurt her. So here's what's going to happen. I could hear him breathing, shallow and quick. Tomorrow morning, you're going to walk into Henderson Marketing and resign. You're going to tell them you've decided to pursue other opportunities. You're going to work your 2 weeks' notice with a smile on your face and professionalism in your attitude. And then you're going to find another job. Any job. Doesn't matter what it pays. Doesn't matter if it's beneath your precious ego. You're going to work. And you're going to support my daughter properly. But Eugene, I'm not finished. You're also going to start treating me with the respect I've earned. Not because I own buildings. Not because I have money. But because I'm a human being who deserves basic courtesy. And you're going to apologize. To me, and to Sophia, for every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every time you made her feel ashamed of her father. David's voice was barely a whisper. And if I don't, then I pick up the phone and call the FBI. I hand over every piece of evidence I have about your creative accounting practices. I let them know about the shell companies, the fake invoices, the phantom consulting fees. I explain how you've been systematically stealing from your clients for 3 years. The line went so quiet I thought he'd hung up. David, you still there? Eugene, how did I know? David, you've been stealing from companies that rent space in buildings I own. Did you really think I wouldn't notice patterns? Did you think I wouldn't pay attention when my tenants started complaining about irregular billing practices? That wasn't entirely true. I'd noticed the patterns because Carlos had brought them to my attention. But David didn't need to know that. Let him think I was some kind of criminal mastermind. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning to make your decision. Resign with dignity, or get arrested for embezzlement. Your choice. I hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt guilty about what I was doing. I'd passed through guilt somewhere around year 10 of David's casual cruelty. I couldn't sleep because I was thinking about Elena. My wife had died without ever knowing how David treated me. She'd thought he was a good man, a loving husband to our daughter. If she'd known the truth, well, Elena had been a lot less patient than I was. She probably would have handled this years ago, but Elena was gone and this was my responsibility now. At 8:30 the next morning, my phone rang. David. Eugene? I did it. I resigned. Good. Mr. Henderson wants to know why I'm leaving. What should I tell him? Tell him you want to spend more time with family. Tell him you're exploring new opportunities. Tell him whatever you want, as long as it's not the truth. And the other thing? The evidence? That depends entirely on how our relationship progresses from here, doesn't it? I could hear voices in the background, the sounds of an office, people working, phones ringing, the world David was walking away from. Eugene, I want you to know. I never meant to. Yes, you did. You meant every word you said, every dismissive look, every time you made my daughter apologize for bringing me around your friends. You meant all of it. The only thing you didn't mean to do was get caught. There was a long pause. What happens now? Now you find a job, any job. You work hard. You treat your wife with the love and respect she deserves. And you start treating me like a human being instead of an inconvenience. And if I do all that, then maybe in time we can put this behind us. Maybe we can actually become family instead of just pretending to be. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring out the window at Elena's garden. She'd spent years planting and tending those roses, watching them grow from nothing into something beautiful. It takes patience to grow roses. It takes time and care and the willingness to wait for something to bloom. Revenge, I realized, was a lot like gardening. But the story still wasn't over. Because 3 days later, something happened that I hadn't planned for. Sophia came to see me. She knocked on my door at 7 in the evening, which was unusual. Sophia was a creature of routine, and evenings were for dinner with David, maybe a movie, definitely not for dropping by her father's house unannounced. When I opened the door, I could see she'd been crying. Dad, we need to talk. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd done homework as a little girl, where she'd told me about her first crush, where she'd announced her engagement to David 15 years ago. But now she looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. David told me what happened at lunch the other day. I made coffee while she talked, gave my hands something to do while I listened. He told me about the buildings, about the money, about everything. I set a mug in front of her and sat down across from her. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? About the buildings? I thought it was obvious. You've been to my office. Your office? Dad, you work maintenance in office buildings. I've seen you with your cleaning cart, your uniform. I work maintenance in office buildings I own, Sophia. There's a difference. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. But why? Why live like you don't have money when you do? Because having money isn't the same as being wealthy. Being wealthy means you don't have to think about money. But having money, that's a responsibility. It changes how people see you, how they treat you. It changes how you see yourself. I thought about Elena, about the conversations we'd had when Sophia was young. Your mother and I decided early on that we wanted you to understand the value of work, of earning things yourself. We wanted you to marry someone who loved you for who you were, not for what you might inherit." Sophia laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Well, that worked out great, didn't it?" "What do you mean?" "Dad, he's been horrible to you. For years. And I just let it happen." She started crying again, and I reached across the table to take her hand. "Sophia, you didn't know." "But I should have known. I should have seen how he treated you. I should have stood up for you. You were protecting your marriage, that's what people do." "No, Dad. I was being a coward. I saw how he talked to you, how he dismissed you, how he made jokes about your job when you weren't around, and I told myself it wasn't that bad. It wasn't worth fighting about. But it was. It was worth fighting about because you're my father and you deserved better." We sat in silence for a while. Outside, I could hear the evening sounds of the neighborhood, dogs barking, kids playing, the normal rhythms of life going on around us. "Dad, David quit his job." "I know. He says you made him do it. He says you threatened him. I gave him a choice. He made it." "What kind of choice?" "The kind where he gets to keep his freedom and his dignity, and I get to keep my respect." Sophia wiped her eyes with a napkin. "He's scared, Dad. Really scared. He thinks you're going to ruin his life. His life was already ruined, Sophia. He just didn't know it yet." "What does that mean?" I got up and walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept important papers, pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table in front of her. "Your husband has been stealing money from his clients for 3 years. $400,000, give or take. I have enough evidence to put him in federal prison for a decade." Sophia's face went white. "That's impossible." I opened the folder and showed her the photographs, the bank records, the trail of false invoices and phantom transactions that Carlos had helped me uncover. "Nothing's impossible, honey. Just improbable." She stared at the papers like they might burst into flames. "David wouldn't. He's a good person, Dad. David is a person who made bad choices. There's a difference. Are you going to turn him in?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether he can prove to me that the man my daughter married is still in there somewhere underneath all the ego and entitlement." Sophia looked up at me, and for a moment she was 8 years old again, asking me to fix something that seemed impossibly broken. What if he can't? Then I'll have to make a very difficult decision about what's more important, protecting you or protecting the principle of justice. We talked until almost midnight. I told her about the buildings, about the investments, about the trust fund that would be hers when I died. I told her about Elena's illness, about how we'd spent her final years making sure Sophia would be taken care of no matter what happened. I also told her about the years of small humiliations, the casual cruelty, the way David had made me feel invisible in my own daughter's life. She cried some more when she heard that. She apologized over and over as if saying sorry enough times could erase 15 years of looking the other way. When she finally left, she hugged me at the door. It was the first time she'd hugged me in months. "Dad, I'm going to fix this." "Sophia, this isn't your responsibility to fix." "Yes, it is. He's my husband. You're my father. This is exactly my responsibility." 2 weeks later, David started working at a car dealership in Queens. Sales associate, minimum wage plus commission. It was a 40-minute subway ride each way, and he had to wear a tie that came from the clearance rack at Men's Warehouse. The first time he sold a car, he called to tell me about it. His voice was different, quieter, humbler. "Eugene, I sold a Camry today, used but in good condition. The commission was $200. That's good, David. Honest money." "Yeah, it is." The conversation was awkward, but it was a conversation. Not a confrontation, not a challenge, just two men talking. "How's Sophia?" She's adjusting. This whole situation has been hard on her." "I know. I'm sorry about that. Are you?" "Sorry, I mean." There was a long pause. "Eugene, I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks. About things I said, things I did. And I realize I turned into someone I don't recognize. What do you mean? I mean, I became the kind of person who judges others by their job title instead of their character. I became someone who cares more about appearing successful than actually being decent. And I don't know when that happened, but it happened. People change, David. The question is whether they change back. Over the next few months, something interesting began to happen. David started coming to Sunday dinner. Not because Sophia dragged him, not because it was expected. He started showing up at my door on Sunday afternoons, sometimes with flowers for my table, always asking if there was anything I needed help with around the house. At first, I was suspicious. This felt like performance, like he was trying to earn his way back into my good graces through forced politeness. But as the weeks went on, I began to see something different. David was learning what I'd known for 37 years, that there's dignity in simple work, honor in showing up every day, satisfaction in earning what you have instead of taking what you want. The car dealership job was teaching him patience. Customers who looked at him the way he used to look at me. People who assumed he was less intelligent, less important, less worthy of respect because he worked in sales instead of an office tower. One Sunday he was helping me fix a leaky faucet in the basement when he stopped working and looked at me. "Eugene, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Why didn't you just destroy me? When you found out about the money I stole, why didn't you just turn me in and be done with it?" I thought about that question for a long time before I answered. Because destroying you would have destroyed Sophia too. And because I remember what it was like to be desperate. You were never desperate. You own half the city. I wasn't born owning buildings, David. I was 28 years old with a pregnant wife and a dream that was bigger than my bank account. I made mistakes. I took risks that could have ruined everything. The difference is I got lucky, you got caught. He nodded slowly. What happens now? With the evidence, I mean. That depends on you. What do you want me to do? I want you to pay it back. David's face went pale. Eugene, $400,000. I don't have $400,000. I can barely make my mortgage payments on what I'm making now. I know. That's why we're going to set up a payment plan. A payment plan? You're going to pay back every penny you stole. It's going to take years, maybe decades, but you're going to pay it back with interest. And you're going to do it without ever telling Sophia about this conversation. How is that possible? She's going to notice if huge chunks of money start disappearing from our accounts. No, she won't. Because you're not going to pay me directly. I don't understand. Every month, you're going to write a check to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, specifically to the Elena Castellano Memorial Fund. David stared at me. You're going to make donations in your name, from your family, in amounts that you can afford without raising questions. $25 here, $50 there, whatever you can manage without creating hardship for my daughter. But that'll take 30 years, give or take. Assuming you stick to a regular schedule and don't miss any payments. David sat down heavily on my workbench. 30 years of payments to a children's hospital. 30 years of remembering that actions have consequences. 30 years of doing something positive with money you earned through something negative. 30 years of proving that the man my daughter married is still in there somewhere. And if I agree to this, then the evidence disappears. Forever. And we never speak of this again. And if I don't agree, then tomorrow morning I make a phone call to the FBI. David looked around my basement workshop. Tools hung neatly on pegboards. Parts organized in labeled bins. Everything clean and functional. 37 years of maintaining buildings had taught me the value of keeping things in good repair. Eugene, why are you giving me this chance? Because Elena believed people could change. Because Sophia loves you. And because I've spent 37 years learning that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show mercy when you have every right to show none. That was 6 months ago. So far, David has made every payment, $25 a month to the Children's Hospital. Always on time. Always with a note explaining that it's a donation in memory of Elena Castellano. Sophia doesn't know about the payments. She doesn't know about the embezzlement. She doesn't know that her husband is slowly, methodically, paying back a debt that could have destroyed their marriage. What she does know is that David is different now, more present, more grateful, more willing to listen before he speaks, to think before he judges. Last month, at Sophia's birthday dinner, David stood up to make a toast. To Sophia, he said, holding his wine glass high. And to Eugene, who taught me that respect isn't something you're owed because of your job title or your bank account. Respect is something you earn through your actions, your character, and your willingness to do what's right even when no one is watching. He looked directly at me when he said that last part. I've learned more about integrity in the past 6 months from my father-in-law than I learned in the previous 40 years combined. After dinner, as we were clearing the dishes, David pulled me aside. Eugene, there's something I need to tell you. What's that? I got promoted at the dealership, sales manager. It comes with a salary instead of just commission. That's good news, David, you've earned it. The thing is, with the extra money, I can increase my monthly donations to the hospital fund. You don't have to do that. I know, but I want to. I want to pay off my debt faster. Not because I'm in a hurry to forget what I did, but because I want to prove that I can be the man Sophia thought she married. 6 months ago, I would have laughed at that statement. 6 months ago, I thought David Kellerman was incapable of genuine change, genuine remorse, genuine growth. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe people can surprise you, even after 15 years of disappointing you. Or maybe this is all performance, elaborate theater designed to keep himself out of prison and keep Sophia from learning the truth about what kind of man she married. Time will tell. It always does. But here's what I know for certain. That lunch at Rossi's Italian kitchen changed everything. Not just for David, not just for me, but for our entire family. Sophia smiles more now. She stands straighter. She started asking me for advice about things that matter, instead of just calling to check if I'm still alive. David works harder at being a good husband than he ever worked at being a successful businessman. He's discovered that earning respect is more satisfying than demanding it. And me? I've learned that 37 years of patience can pay dividends you never expected. The buildings still need maintenance. The rent still needs collecting. The invoices still need paying. But now, I have help with all of that. David has been teaching himself about property management, learning the business from the ground up. Last week, he asked if he could come with me on one of my morning rounds. I want to understand what you do, he said. I want to see the buildings through your eyes. So we spent 4 hours walking through the Meridian Tower together. I showed him how to check for water damage, how to spot electrical problems before they became emergencies, how to listen to the sounds a building makes when something isn't working properly. At one point, we were in the basement checking the heating system, when David stopped and looked at me. Eugene, this is actually interesting work. Most people don't see it that way. Most people don't understand that every building is like a living organism. It has systems that need to work together. Heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, security. When one system fails, it affects everything else. You have to think 3 steps ahead. Anticipate problems before they happen. David nodded, genuinely interested. It's like managing a company, isn't it? Except the company is made of steel and concrete instead of people. Exactly. And the tenants are your customers. Their comfort, their safety, their ability to do their work. That all depends on you doing your job right. We climbed back upstairs, past the floors where David used to work, past his old corner office with its harbor view. The space had been rented to a law firm 3 months after Henderson Marketing couldn't make their new lease payments. That's when David asked the question I'd been waiting for. Eugene, what happens when you retire? I mean, really retire. Who takes care of all this? I thought about Elena, about the conversations we'd had about legacy and family and what we wanted to leave behind. That depends on whether I have anyone I can trust to do it right. David was quiet for a long moment. Could you teach me? Really teach me, I mean. Not just the basics, but everything. How to evaluate properties, how to negotiate leases, how to manage contractors and tenants and all of it. Why? Because I want to be part of something that matters. I want to build something instead of just taking from it. That conversation happened 3 weeks ago. Since then, David has been shadowing me 2 evenings a week and every Saturday morning, learning the business from the foundation up. He's got a head for numbers, I'll give him that. And he's starting to develop an eye for detail that you can't fake. Last Saturday, he spotted a crack in the foundation of the Riverside Commons building that I'd missed. Small crack, barely visible, but the kind of thing that becomes a major problem if you ignore it. More importantly, he's learning to see people differently. The security guards, the cleaning crews, the maintenance technicians. He talks to them now, asks their names, remembers details about their families, treats them like human beings instead of furniture. Maria Santos, who's been cleaning offices in the Meridian Tower for 8 years, pulled me aside last week. Mr. Castellano, that son-in-law of yours, he's different now. Different how? He says good morning when he sees me. Asks about my grandson who's in college. Last week, when I was having trouble with one of the industrial vacuum cleaners, he helped me figure out what was wrong. Maria had worked on the same floor as David for 3 years when he had his corner office. In all that time, he'd never once acknowledged her existence. People can change, Maria. Some people can't. But some people can. The trick is figuring out which kind you're dealing with. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. About change, about forgiveness, about the difference between justice and revenge. When David humiliated me at that restaurant, I had every right to destroy him completely. I had the evidence, I had the connections, I had the power. I could have ruined his career, his marriage, his freedom, his future. Instead, I chose something harder. I chose to give him a chance to become the man he should have been all along. Was it mercy? Was it wisdom? Or was it just an old man's stubborn refusal to give up on the idea that people are capable of redemption? I don't know. What I know is that Sophia is happy in a way she hasn't been in years. What I know is that David gets up every morning and works hard at a job that teaches him humility. What I know is that somewhere in Philadelphia, there's a children's hospital with a little more money to help sick kids because a man is trying to pay back a debt that goes deeper than dollars and cents. But the most important thing I know is this. Respect isn't something you can demand or buy or inherit. Respect is something you earn, one honest day at a time. 3 months ago, David asked me if I thought Elena would have approved of how I handled things. I think about that question a lot. Elena was tougher than me in some ways, more direct. She would have confronted David years earlier, wouldn't have let the disrespect slide for as long as I did. But Elena also believed in second chances. She believed people could grow, could learn, could become better versions of themselves if someone cared enough to show them how. I think Elena would have been proud of the patience I showed. I think she would have been proud that I found a way to teach instead of just punish, to heal instead of just hurt. And I think she would have been especially proud that I never let David's disrespect make me into someone smaller, or meaner, or more bitter than I was before. That's the real victory, isn't it? Not that I had power over him, not that I could have destroyed him, but that I chose not to. That I chose to use my power to build something instead of tear it down. Last Sunday, David brought his laptop to dinner and showed Sophia and me a spreadsheet he'd been working on. A 5-year plan for expanding the property portfolio, complete with market analysis, projected costs, and potential return on investment. The plan was good, really good. Better than some proposals I'd paid consultants thousands of dollars to produce. Sophia looked at the numbers, then at me, then at David. "This is incredible work, honey." David smiled, but it wasn't the arrogant, self-satisfied smile I'd grown accustomed to over the years. This was different. This was the smile of someone who'd earned something through effort instead of taking it through entitlement. Eugene's been teaching me how to look at buildings as investments instead of just places to work, how to see potential instead of just problems. After dinner, Sophia walked me to my car. "Dad, I want to thank you." For what? For not giving up on him. For seeing something in David that I'd stopped seeing. You never stopped seeing it, honey. You just got tired of looking for it. He's becoming the man I thought I married 15 years ago. No, I said. He's becoming the man he was always capable of being. He just needed the right motivation to get there. As I drove home that night, I thought about motivation, about what drives people to change, to grow, to become better than they were. For some people, motivation comes from love, from wanting to be worthy of the people who believe in them. For others, motivation comes from fear, from understanding the consequences of continuing down the wrong path. For David, I think it came from both. Fear of losing everything that mattered to him. Love for a daughter and father-in-law who deserved better than what he'd been giving them. But mostly, I think it came from discovering that there's more satisfaction in earning respect than there is in demanding it. More pride in building something than in taking it. More peace in being honest than in living a lie. That's a lesson it took me 37 years to teach. But some lessons are worth the wait. Yesterday I got a call from Jennifer at the property management office. She had news about the Henderson marketing lease situation. Eugene, you're not going to believe this. David Kellerman called asking if we had any openings in the Meridian Tower. What kind of openings? Office space. He says he's starting a property consulting business and wants to rent a small office on the 20th floor. The 20th floor. Not the 42nd with the harbor view. Not trying to reclaim his old territory or prove anything to anyone. Just a small office where he could do honest work. What did you tell him? I told him I'd have to check with you first. Rent him the space, Jennifer. Same terms as any other tenant. No family discounts, no special treatment. Are you sure? Given the history, I'm sure. Business is business. But after I hung up, I called David directly. I hear you're starting your own company. News travels fast in the property management world. Why consulting? Why not stick with car sales? Because I've learned that I'm good at analyzing buildings and markets. And because there's something appealing about helping other people make smart investments instead of what I was doing before. We talked for a few more minutes about lease terms and office space and the practicalities of starting a business. But what I really heard was confidence without arrogance, ambition tempered by humility, hope grounded in realistic expectations. When we finished talking, I sat in my kitchen and looked out at Elena's rose garden. The roses were blooming again, the way they did every spring. Beautiful and fragrant and alive. 37 years of patient tending. That's what it had taken to grow something beautiful out of dirt and seeds and time. Maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not a single moment of mercy, but years of patient tending. Watering when there's no sign of growth. Pruning back the dead parts. Waiting through the winters for spring to come again. David's business has been open for 2 months now. He has 3 clients, all small-time investors looking for their first commercial properties. He's making enough to cover his expenses and his monthly donations to the hospital fund. More importantly, he's building something with his own hands, his own mind, his own effort. Something he can be proud of. Something that adds value instead of taking it away. Last week, one of his clients bought a small apartment building in Brooklyn. David called me afterward, excited as a kid on Christmas morning. Eugene, the building appraised for exactly what I told them it would appraise for. My analysis was right on the money. That's good work, David. I couldn't have done it without everything you taught me. You could have. You just wouldn't have. The difference between couldn't and wouldn't. That's what this whole story has been about, hasn't it? The difference between inability and unwillingness. The difference between can't and won't. David couldn't respect me when he thought I was just a custodian. But he wouldn't respect me even after he learned I owned the buildings. It took losing everything. His job, his sense of superiority, his illusions about himself, before he was willing to see me as a person deserving of basic human dignity. That's the thing about respect. You can't force someone to give it. You can demand it, you can threaten for it, you can try to buy it. But real respect, the kind that matters, can only be earned through consistent behavior over time. And once you've earned it, you have to keep earning it every day. 3 days ago, something happened that showed me just how much David has really changed. I was at the Meridian Tower checking on some electrical work when I overheard a conversation in the lobby. 2 men in expensive suits were talking about their offices, comparing square footage and views and rent prices. One of them mentioned David's consulting business. Yeah, Kellerman Properties. Guy runs it out of a tiny office on 20. Used to have a corner office on 42 before he got fired from Henderson Marketing. The other man laughed. What's he doing now, cleaning buildings like his father-in-law? They both laughed at that. The cruel, casual laughter of people who think other people's struggles are entertaining. I was about to say something when David walked into the lobby. He'd heard them too. The old David would have gotten angry, would have made a scene, tried to defend his reputation, maybe even thrown around some threats about lawsuits or professional connections. The new David walked over to the 2 men and smiled. Excuse me, I couldn't help but overhear. I'm David Kellerman from Kellerman Properties, and you're right, I did get fired from Henderson Marketing. Best thing that ever happened to me. The 2 men looked uncomfortable, like they'd been caught gossiping by a teacher. I learned more about business in the past year working with my father-in-law than I learned in 15 years sitting behind a desk pretending to be important. Eugene Castellano owns half the commercial real estate in this city, and he still takes pride in making sure every building runs properly. That's the kind of work ethic I want to build my company on. One of the men mumbled something about being sorry for the misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, David said. I'm proud to work in the same industry as my father-in-law. And if you ever need honest advice about commercial real estate investments, you know where to find me. 20th floor. Then he walked away, leaving the 2 men standing there looking embarrassed and small. I followed David to the elevator. You didn't have to do that. Yeah, I did. You've spent 37 years taking care of these buildings and the people in them. The least I can do is make sure people understand that what you do matters. The elevator arrived, and we rode up in comfortable silence. But I was thinking about respect again, about how David had just demonstrated more genuine respect in 2 minutes than he'd shown in 15 years of family dinners. Respect isn't just about how you treat someone when you're alone with them. It's about how you talk about them when they're not around. It's about standing up for them when they can't stand up for themselves. When we got to David's office, he poured 2 cups of coffee, and we sat down to review the paperwork for a property he was analyzing for a client. Eugene, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you think I'm really changing, or am I just getting better at acting like I've changed? That's a good question, David. What do you think? He was quiet for a long time, staring out his window at the city below. I think I'm different than I was a year ago. But I also think there's a part of me that's always going to be tempted to take shortcuts, to look for easy answers, to judge people by the wrong criteria. That's honest. The difference is now I recognize those temptations when they happen, and I try to make better choices. That's all anyone can do, David. Try to make better choices. We worked for another hour, going over market analyses and rental comps and zoning regulations. Normal business stuff. But underneath it all was something new. Mutual respect built on mutual understanding. When I was getting ready to leave, David handed me an envelope. What's this? My check for this month's hospital donation. But also, something else. I opened the envelope. Inside was the usual $25 check made out to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. But there was also a handwritten letter. To the Elena Castellano Memorial Fund, it began. This month's donation is made in memory of a woman I never met but wish I had. From what I've learned about Elena Castellano, she was someone who believed in second chances and the power of patience. She raised a daughter who exemplifies kindness and compassion. She was married to a man who embodies integrity and wisdom. The letter went on to explain David's commitment to the monthly donations, not as penance for past mistakes, but as a way to honor the values Elena had lived by. Values he was trying to live by now too. At the bottom, he'd written, I hope to spend the rest of my life proving worthy of the second chance your husband gave me. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. David, you don't need to write letters with your donations. I know, but I want to. It helps me remember why I'm making them. That night, I called Sophia and told her about what had happened in the lobby, about how David had defended me to those two men, how he'd stood up for the work I do and the respect I deserve. She was quiet for a long time after I finished the story. Dad, I need to tell you something. What's that? I've been angry at myself for months. Angry that I didn't see how David was treating you. Angry that I didn't stand up for you the way I should have. Sophia, let me finish. I've been thinking about getting into counseling, maybe couples counseling, to work through some of these issues. But after hearing this story, I think maybe David and I are going to be okay. You were always going to be okay, honey. You married a man with good bones. He just needed some time to remember what those bones were for. The next morning, I was in my workshop, organizing tools and thinking about the past year, when the phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Answered, Mr. Castellano, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Yes? I'm calling about the Elena Castellano Memorial Fund. We've been receiving regular donations from a David Kellerman, and each donation comes with the most beautiful letters about your wife and your family. Oh, yes. Mr. Castellano, I wanted you to know that these donations, along with the letters, have inspired our entire fundraising team. We've started sharing Mr. Kellerman's letters at our monthly staff meetings as examples of what real philanthropy looks like. I wasn't sure what to say to that. More importantly, Dr. Williams continued, the fund has grown beyond just Mr. Kellerman's contributions. Other people have read about Elena's story and started making donations too. As of this morning, the Elena Castellano Memorial Fund has raised over $15,000 for our pediatric oncology ward. $15,000. More than Elena and I had ever donated to anything in our entire lives. Mr. Castellano, are you still there? I'm here. I'm surprised. Your wife's legacy is helping heal sick children, Mr. Castellano. And your son-in-law's commitment to honoring that legacy has inspired dozens of other people to get involved. I thought you should know. After I hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, thinking about legacy and memory and the ways our actions ripple outward in directions we never expect. Elena had been gone for 8 years, but her memory was still making the world a little bit better, one donation at a time. And David, the man who'd never met her, was the one making sure her story continued to matter. Maybe that's what redemption really looks like. Not just changing your own behavior, but inspiring others to be better too. 6 months later, at Sophia's 38th birthday party, David stood up to make another toast. To Elena Castellano, he said, raising his glass toward the framed photograph on the mantel. A woman I never had the privilege of meeting, but who taught me the most important lesson of my life. He turned to look at me. Elena taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day. It's the choice to be patient when someone disappoints you. The choice to see potential when everyone else sees problems. The choice to build something beautiful instead of tearing something down. His voice got quieter. Eugene, I spent 15 years disappointing you, disrespecting you, making you feel invisible in your own daughter's life. You had every right to give up on me, every reason to walk away, but you didn't. He looked at Sophia. You chose to love me anyway, not because I deserved it, but because love is what you do. And that choice saved my marriage, my family, and probably my life. The room was completely quiet except for the sound of Sophia crying softly. So here's my promise to all of you. Every day for the rest of my life, I'm going to try to be worthy of the love I've been given. I'm going to try to be the kind of man Elena would have been proud to call her son-in-law, the kind of father Eugene can be proud to call family. After everyone had gone home and the dishes were cleaned and put away, Sophia and David and I sat on the back porch looking out at Elena's rose garden. The roses were in full bloom, their perfume filling the evening air. Somewhere in the distance we could hear children playing, the sound of life continuing its eternal cycle of growth and change and hope. David pulled out his phone and showed us a photo. It was a screenshot of a newspaper article about the Children's Hospital fundraiser. The headline read, "Local Memorial Fund raises $50,000 for pediatric cancer ward." $50,000, he said. All because people heard Elena's story and wanted to be part of something good. Sophia leaned against my shoulder. Mom would have loved this. She would have loved all of it, I said. The second chances, the hard work, the family dinners, the roses blooming again every spring. But mostly I think she would have loved knowing that her memory is still helping people, still teaching lessons, still making the world a little bit better. David put his phone away and looked at me. "Eugene, I have something I need to tell you." "What's that?" "The debt. My payments to the hospital fund. I know I still owe you about $300,000, and at $25 a month, it'll take me the rest of my life to pay it back." "That's right. I want to pay more. My business is doing well enough now that I can afford to make larger donations. I want to pay off the debt faster." I shook my head. "David, the point was never the money. I know. But I want to do more. I want to set up a proper endowment for the fund, something that will keep helping kids long after we're all gone." "How much are you talking about?" "All of it. Everything I owe, plus interest, plus enough to establish a permanent fund. I've been saving every extra penny I make, and I want to donate it all at once." "David, it's what Elena would have done. It's what you taught me to do. It's the right thing." That conversation was 2 weeks ago. Tomorrow, David and I are going to the Children's Hospital together. We're going to present them with a check for $500,000 to establish the Elena Castellano Endowment for pediatric cancer research. $500,000 that started with a $25 monthly donation from a man trying to pay back a debt that couldn't be measured in money. I've been thinking about that lunch at Rossi's Italian Kitchen a lot lately. How it started with an insult and ended with transformation. How David's cruelty became the catalyst for his redemption. How my patience became the foundation for his growth. But mostly I've been thinking about Elena and what she would make of all this. I think she'd be proud that I chose mercy over revenge. I think she'd be amazed that her memory is helping heal sick children. I think she'd be happy that Sophia's marriage became stronger instead of breaking apart. And I think she'd be satisfied that David finally learned the lesson it took me 37 years to teach. That every person you meet deserves your respect regardless of their job title or bank account or position in life. Because you never know who you're really talking to. You never know what someone has overcome to get where they are. You never know what they're capable of when they're treated with dignity instead of contempt. The quiet custodian might own the building. The woman cleaning offices might have 3 college degrees. The man selling cars might become your most trusted business partner. People are more than the sum of their visible parts, their stories and struggles and dreams and disappointments, their potential wrapped in flesh and blood, waiting for someone to believe in them enough to help them become who they're meant to be. 3 weeks ago, David asked me if I thought we were even now. If his transformation and his donations and his years of changed behavior had balanced the scales of justice. I told him the truth. There are no scales when it comes to forgiveness. There's no ledger where debts get canceled out by good deeds. Forgiveness isn't accounting, it's grace. But there is something that makes all the difference. Something that transforms a transaction into a relationship, a punishment into a blessing, an ending into a beginning. Gratitude. Every month when David writes his check to the Children's Hospital, he's not just paying back money he stole, he's saying thank you. Thank you for the second chance. Thank you for the patience. Thank you for seeing something worth saving in a man who'd forgotten how to see it in himself. And every month when I read his letter to Elena's memorial fund, I'm saying thank you too. Thank you for proving that people can change. Thank you for becoming the man my daughter deserved. Thank you for helping Elena's memory continue to heal the world. That's what forgiveness really is. Not forgetting what happened, but choosing to write a different ending. Not pretending the hurt wasn't real, but deciding that love is more powerful than pain. It took me 71 years to learn that lesson. It took David 43 years to learn it, but we both learned it, and now we're teaching it to anyone willing to listen. Tomorrow, when we walk into that children's hospital and present them with Elena's endowment, we'll be doing more than donating money. We'll be proving that redemption is real, that second chances matter, that love really can triumph over everything that tries to tear it down. And somewhere in that hospital, there will be sick children who get better because a man who once mocked honest work learned to honor it instead. Children who live because a woman who died 8 years ago is still healing the world through the memory of her kindness. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. So here's what I want you to remember from my story. Here's the lesson I learned after 37 years of patience and one afternoon of perfect revenge. The most powerful thing you can do to someone who has hurt you isn't to hurt them back. It's to love them anyway. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because love transforms the giver even more than it transforms the receiver. And if you're someone who's made mistakes, someone who's treated people badly, someone who's looking for a second chance, remember this. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. It's never too late to choose respect over arrogance, building over tearing down, love over fear. But you have to choose it every day. Every single day for the rest of your life. Because that's what integrity is. Not a moment of goodness, but a lifetime of good moments strung together like pearls on a string. David learned that lesson. I learned it too, just from a different angle. And if this story taught you anything about the power of patience, the importance of respect, or the possibility of redemption, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more stories about second chances and the complicated beauty of family. But mostly, remember this. You never know who you're really talking to. So treat everyone like they matter. Because they do. My name is Eugene Castellano. I'm 71 years old. I own 17 buildings in this city, and I'm still proud to push a mop when the work needs doing. Some people might call that a waste of education, talent, or potential. I call it the foundation of everything I've built, and I wouldn't change a thing.